The dust cloud on the horizon moved like a prayer across the endless Nebraska sky. And 12-year-old Emma Patterson knew it carried trouble. She pressed her face against the cool glass of the kitchen window, watching the lone figure stumble toward their homestead. The woman's wedding dress, once white as fresh snow, now hung torn and stained with prairie mud. "Papa," Emma called softly, not wanting to wake her sleeping father. He'd been working the fields since dawn, his weathered hands cracked from another season of drought. But something about the approaching stranger made Emma's heart flutter with possibility rather than fear. The woman collapsed just 20 yards from their front porch. Emma ran outside, her bare feet flying across the dusty yard. Close. The stranger was beautiful despite her disheveled state golden hair, tangled with thorns. Green eyes bright with unshed tears, and a face that spoke of gentleness even in distress. "Please," the woman whispered, grasping Emma's small hand. I can't." "You're safe now," Emma said, surprised by the certainty in her own voice. "I'm Emma. What's your name?" "Sarah," the woman managed. "Sarah Mitchell."
"Hi."
"I was supposed to be Sarah Garrett today, but Her voice broke. Emma helped Sarah to her feet, marveling at how perfectly the woman's hand fit in hers. "You need a home," Emma said simply, "and I want a sister." The words hung between them like a promise neither quite understood yet. Papa emerged from the house as Emma guided Sarah up the porch steps. Thomas Patterson was a man carved from the same stubborn clay as the Nebraska soil, hard when he needed to be, but with a heart that could nurture life from nothing. His wife had died bringing Emma into the world, and since then, the house had felt too quiet, too empty. "Found her collapsed in the yard," Emma explained, her protective arm around Sarah's waist. "She's had trouble." Thomas studied the runaway bride with knowing eyes. He'd seen enough broken people drift through these parts to recognize someone fleeing more than just geography. "Come inside, miss." "Emma, put the kettle on." As Sarah sank into their only comfortable chair, her story spilled out in broken pieces. She'd come from Boston to marry Harold Garrett, a prosperous rancher who'd promised her comfort and security. But comfort, she'd discovered too late, came with a price she couldn't pay. "He wasn't cruel," Sarah said, wrapping Emma's mother's shawl around her shoulders. "Not in the way people might think. But he wanted to own me, shape me into something I could never be. When I said I needed time to think, She touched her wrist where a bruise was forming. "He said thinking was dangerous for women." Emma's young face flushed with anger. "You were right to run, but where can I go?" Sarah's voice cracked. "I have no family, no money. Harold will be looking for me by now." Thomas exchanged a glance with his daughter. In that look passed years of loneliness, dreams of a fuller table, and the recognition that sometimes Providence wore a tattered wedding dress. "You can stay here," Thomas said quietly. "Work for room and board. It's honest work, cooking, mending, helping with Emma's schooling." "Nothing you don't want to do." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to repay such kindness." Emma took her hand again. "You already have. Gave me hope for a sister." The first weeks passed like a careful dance around unspoken truths. Sarah proved invaluable. Her Boston education helped with Emma's arithmetic. Her gentle hands coaxed vegetables from their struggling garden. And her presence brought laughter back to the Patterson house for the first time in years. But Harold Garrett wasn't a man to let go icily. He came on a Tuesday morning with 2 hired men, their faces hard as granite. Emma was in the barn when she heard the horses, but she recognized the danger immediately. She'd learned to read the signs the way birds went silent before a storm, the way the air itself seemed to hold its breath. "Sarah's inside," she whispered to herself, her heart hammering. Papa was in the far field. It's too distant to help. Emma slipped through the back door, just as Harold's fist pounded the front one. "Sarah, I know you're in there." His voice carried the entitled rage of a man unused to being denied. "This foolishness ends now." Sarah stood frozen in the kitchen, her face pale as moonlight. Emma grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the root cellar. "No," Sarah said firmly, surprising them both. "I won't hide any more." She opened the front door with Emma beside. Her and Harold Garrett's presence filled the doorway like a thundercloud. He was handsome in a cold way, with steel-gray eyes and a mouth that had forgotten how to smile genuinely. "There you are," he said, his voice deceptively gentle.
Darling.
"You've caused quite a stir. The whole town's talking." "Good," Sarah replied. Her chin lifted in defiance. "Let them talk." Harold's eyes flicked to Emma with distaste. "Consorting with dirt farmers now, are we? How far you fallen?" He stepped inside without invitation. "Pack your things. We're going home." "This is my home now," Sarah said, though her voice trembled slightly. The crack of Harold's hand across her cheek echoed through the small house like a gunshot. Emma cried out, but Sarah held her ground, one hand pressed to her reddening face. "Belong to me," Harold snarled. "I paid good money for your passage, gave you my name. You'll honor that commitment." "I never said yes at the altar," Sarah whispered. "Details," Harold waved dismissively. "You're coming home now." That's when Thomas Patterson appeared in the doorway, a rifle cradled in his arms like a sleeping child. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet as morning frost and twice as deadly. "I believe the lady said no." The standoff stretched taut as a wire fence in winter. Harold's hired men shifted nervously, their hands hovering near their guns. But Thomas Patterson had the kind of stillness that came from absolute certainty. He'd fought in the war between the states, had seen enough violence to know when it was necessary and when it was just waste. "This is a private matter between a man and his intended," Harold said, though his bluster had lost some of its force. "You have no legal standing here?" "Maybe not," Thomas agreed. "But I've got moral standing, and that trumps legal every time on my land." Emma watched the scene unfold with the keen awareness of a child who'd grown up fast on the frontier. She could see the calculation in Harold's eyes, the way he measured risks against rewards. Sarah stood between them like a bridge over troubled water, and Emma realized with sudden clarity that her new sister was worth fighting for. "What do you want, Garrett?" Thomas asked finally. "My bride? In compensation for my trouble." Harold's smile was sharp as broken glass. $500. Plus the girl. "The girl has a name," Emma said, stepping forward despite Sarah's restraining hand. "And she's not for sale." Harold laughed. "Children should be seen and not heard." "Little mouse." The insult hit Emma like a physical blow, but it was Sarah who reacted. She moved between Harold and Emma with the fierce protection of a mother wolf. "Don't you dare speak to her like that. I'll speak however I please, too. "Nobody," Sarah interrupted, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Because you're leaving now, and you're not coming back." Harold's face darkened. "You think this shabby farmer can protect you?" "I have influence, Sarah. Power. I can make life very difficult for people who cross me." "Then you'll have to make it difficult for all of us," Emma said, surprising herself with her boldness. "Because we're family now. We're stepped closer, the rifle still cradled but ready. You heard the ladies, Garrett? Time to go." For a moment, violence hung in the air like heat lightning. Then Harold laughed, but it was an ugly sound devoid of humor. "This isn't over, Sarah. You can't hide on this pathetic homestead forever." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Winter's coming early this year. Funny how accidents happen when the snow gets deep. Fires start easy in dry weather. Animals get sick. People too." The threat hung in the air long after his dust cloud disappeared over the horizon. That night, Sarah sat on Emma's narrow bed, braiding the girl's long brown hair by lamplight. It had become their evening ritual. These quiet moments when the day's work was done and the house settled into peaceful shadows. "Are you scared?" Emma asked softly. Sarah's hands never paused in their gentle work. "Terrified," she admitted. "But not of Harold. I'm scared of bringing danger to you and your father. Maybe I should leave." "No." Emma twisted around to face her. "You said I was your sister. Sisters don't abandon each other." "But Emma, you don't understand. Harold meant what he said about making trouble. He has friends, influence. He could try." Emma interrupted with the fierce certainty of youth. "But he doesn't understand what he's up against. A 12-year-old girl and her father." "Family," Emma corrected. "And families fight for each other." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I never had a family before. Not really. My parents sent me away to school when I was 7, then to live with an aunt who saw me as a burden. When Harold's advertisement appeared, marriage seemed like the only way to belong somewhere. Emma took Sarah's hands in her own small ones. You belong here. Papa sees it too. The way you make him smile when you bring him coffee in the field. The way you saved his prized tomatoes when the aphids came. The way you make this house feel like home instead of just a place we live. A tear rolled down Sarah's cheek. I love you both so much it frightens me. Love isn't supposed to frighten. You, Harold, frightened you? Love is supposed to make you brave. From the kitchen came the soft sound of Thomas banking the fire for the night, humming an old song under his breath. It was a sound of contentment, of a man who'd found peace after years of loneliness. He's been humming again, Emma whispered, conspiratorially. He hasn't hummed since Mama died. You did that. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. I can't marry him, Emma, even if I have feelings. Why not? Because I'm damaged goods. A runaway bride. The town already whispers about the scandal. He's a good man who deserves better. Emma shook her head with the wisdom of someone who'd learned early that life was too short for foolish pride. Appa says the best things in life come broken and have to be mended with love, like his grandfather's rifle that shoots true even with a cracked stock. Like our horse Star with the bad leg, who still carries us everywhere we need to go. Like me, I guess, growing up without a mama. You're not broken, sweetheart. Maybe not. But I was incomplete, and so were you, and so was Papa. But together, Emma smiled. Together, we're something beautiful. Harold returned with winter's first snow, but this time he wasn't alone. He brought the sheriff, a nervous man named Williams, who clearly wished he were anywhere else, and a document that made Sarah's heart sink. Marriage contract, Harold announced triumphantly, flourishing the paper like a weapon. Legally binding, signed by both parties. Thomas read the document carefully, while Sarah stood pale and shaking beside him. Emma pressed close to her adopted sister's side, offering what comfort she could. This just says you agree to marry her pending a proper courtship period, Thomas said finally. Nothing about her being bound to you if she changes her mind. She accepted my proposal in writing, Harold insisted. That's a contract in the eyes of God and law. Sheriff Williams cleared his throat uncomfortably. Now, Harold, you know changing your mind isn't a crime, ... But breach of promise is? Harold smiled coldly. I've suffered damages to my reputation. Lost money on wedding preparations? The law entitles me to compensation. How much? Thomas asked quietly. $1,000? Or the girl honors her commitment. Emma gasped. $1,000 might as well have been $1 million. The farm barely produced enough to keep them fed and clothed. You know, we don't have that kind of money, Sarah whispered. Then you know what you have to do? Harold's satisfaction was ugly to witness. Don't worry, darling. I'll forgive this little rebellion once we're properly wed. Thomas set the document on the kitchen table with deliberate care. Sheriff, what exactly does the law say about a woman's right to refuse marriage? Williams shifted uncomfortably. Well, technically, a woman can't be forced to marry against her will. But she can be sued for damages if she breaks a promise, Harold finished smoothly. And if she can't pay, well, debtors still go to prison in this state. The trap was elegantly simple and utterly ruthless. Sarah would marry Harold or spend years in debtor's prison, destroying the Patterson family in the process. Emma watched. The adults dance around the truth everyone understood. Harold had one. He'd found a way to use the law itself as a weapon, turning Sarah's attempt at freedom into chains that bound not just her, but everyone she'd learned to love. Need time to think, Sarah said finally. 1 week, Harold replied magnanimously. Then we have the wedding, and all this unpleasantness is forgotten. After they left, the house felt smaller somehow, as if Harold's presence had sucked the warmth from every corner. Emma found Sarah standing at the kitchen window, staring out at the snow-covered prairie. There has to be another way, Emma said fiercely. There isn't. Sarah's voice was empty of hope. I won't let him destroy your family because of my mistakes. If you weren't Sarah Mitchell anymore, Sarah turned, confusion in her green eyes, What if you were Sarah Patterson? Emma continued, the idea forming even as she spoke. Harold can't sue Papa's wife for breach of promise to another man. From the doorway, Thomas spoke quietly. Emma, it's not that simple. Why not? You love her. She loves you. I can see it in the way you look at each other when you think nobody's watching. Both adults flushed, but neither denied it. Because Sarah said gently, marriage should be about love, not legal maneuvering. Your father deserves someone who chooses him freely. Not because she's trapped. But what if it's both? Thomas stepped into the room, his weathered face serious. What if love and legal necessity happened to align? Emma held her breath as her father and her chosen sister looked at each other across the small kitchen. In that, look past months of growing affection, shared work, quiet conversations by the fire, and the recognition that what had begun as shelter had grown into something deeper. Sarah, Thomas said formally, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Thomas, ... Sarah's voice caught. Not because of Harold, he continued quickly. Not because of the law or the money or any of that, because I love you. Because you've brought joy back to this house. Because Emma's right together were something beautiful. Sarah's tears fell freely now. I love you too. I have 4 weeks, but I didn't dare hope. ... Is that a yes? Emma asked breathlessly. Sarah nodded, unable to speak through her tears. Emma whooped with joy, but Thomas held up a cautioning hand. We'll need to move fast. Harold won't give up easily. The circuit preacher is due next Sunday, Emma said practically. For the Hendersons' baby blessing? Maybe he could marry you too. 3 days, Thomas mused. Can we keep Harold away for 3 days? We won't have to, Sarah said, wiping her eyes. He thinks he's won. He'll wait until the last moment to save her. His victory, Emma grinned. Then we'll give him a surprise he won't forget. Sunday dawned clear and cold, with that crystalline quality that made the snow-covered prairie look like a fairyland. Word had spread through the small community. The Patterson homestead was having a wedding. Emma wore her best dress, the blue calico that brought out her eyes, and helped Sarah into her mother's wedding gown. It was simple compared to the elaborate Boston creation Harold had provided, but it fit Sarah like it was meant for her. As if Thomas's first wife had somehow known this day would come. Mama would have loved you, Emma said, adjusting the veil. She always wanted me to have a sister. The small church really just the schoolhouse with the desks pushed aside, filled with neighbors who'd come to witness something beautiful in a harsh land. The Hendersons were there with their new baby, old Mrs. Kowalski, who baked the wedding cake. The Miller family who'd brought wildflowers despite the snow. Thomas stood at the front in his best suit, nervously smoothing his hair. It shaved carefully, and looked younger, somehow, like the burden of years of loneliness had lifted from his shoulders. Emma walked down the aisle first, scattering rose petals her neighbors had pressed last summer. Then came Sarah, radiant despite her nervousness. Moving toward the man who'd offered her not just love but the freedom to choose it, the Reverend Morrison, a kind man with gentle eyes, began the familiar words, Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today ... That's when the church doors burst open. Harold Garrett stood silhouetted against the snowy landscape, his face twisted with rage. Behind him were his 2 hired men and Sheriff Williams, who looked deeply uncomfortable with the situation. Stop. This farce, Harold shouted. That woman is promised to me. A murmur of shock rippled through the congregation. But Thomas stepped protectively in front of Sarah, his jaw set with quiet determination. The lady made her choice, Reverend Morrison said calmly. In the eyes of God and man, she's free to marry whom she pleases. Not when she's under legal contract to me. Harold stormed down the aisle waving the marriage agreement. Sheriff, arrest that woman for breach of promise. Williams hesitated. The church was full of his neighbors, people who'd elected him to protect them, not to enforce the whims of wealthy bullies from other counties. Now, Harold, he said uncertainly, maybe we should discuss this outside ... There's nothing to discuss. Harold grabbed Sarah's arm, his grip tight enough to bruise. You're coming with me now. Let go of her, Thomas said quietly. But his voice carried the promise of violence if necessary. Harold's hired men moved to flank him, their hands resting on their gun belts. The wedding guests pressed back against the walls, parents pulling their children close. Emma watched it all with the keen awareness of someone who'd learned early to read the currents of adult emotion. She could see Harold's desperation beneath his rage, a man who'd never been denied anything, now facing the possibility that money and power might not be enough. She could see her father's protective fury, held in check only by the presence of innocent people who might be hurt if violence erupted. Most clearly of all, she could see Sarah's quiet courage as she pulled free of Harold's grasp and stood tall despite her fear. "I'm not going anywhere with you, Harold," Sarah said clearly, her voice carrying to every corner of the small church. "I'm marrying Thomas Patterson today, and no law or contract will stop me. We'll see about that." Harold turned to Sheriff Williams. "Arrest her." Williams looked around the church at the faces of his neighbors, good people who'd come to celebrate love, not witness intimidation. His decision was written in the straightening of his shoulders. "I'm not arresting anybody for wanting to get married," he said firmly. "If you've got a legal complaint, Harold, take it up with the territorial court. This is a house of God, and you're disturbing a holy ceremony." Harold's face went purple with rage. "You'll regret this, Williams. All of you will regret this." Spun toward the door, then stopped, his smile returning with chilling suddenness. "Enjoy your wedding," he said to Sarah. "I hope it's worth the price you'll all pay." The threat hung in the air as he stalked out, his men following. The church remained silent for a long moment, the joy of the occasion seemingly poisoned by his words. Then Emma stepped forward, taking Sarah's hand in Thomas's, joining them together. "Keep going, Reverend," she said with quiet dignity. "Love is stronger than hate.
Dama
taught me that." Reverend Morrison smiled, his faith renewed by the courage of a 12-year-old girl. "Where were we? Ah, yes. ... Do you, Thomas Patterson, take this woman." The ceremony continued, and when Thomas kissed his bride, the church erupted in celebration. Harold Garrett's threat seemed less important than the joy of two lonely hearts finding home in each other. But Emma noticed how tightly Sarah held Thomas's hand, and she wondered if her new sister sensed, as she did, that this was only the beginning of their troubles. Harold's revenge came with the spring thaw. The territorial court, influenced by friends of Harold's father back east, ruled that Sarah owed him compensation for breach of promise. When the Pattersons couldn't pay the $1,000 judgment, the court ordered the farm sold to satisfy the debt. Emma sat on the porch steps, watching her father load their few possessions into the wagon. 6 months of marriage had transformed both Thomas and Sarah. They moved together with the unconscious harmony of people who'd found their missing piece. But now they faced losing everything they'd built together. "Where will we go?" Emma asked Sarah, who sat beside her with her own grief carefully hidden. "Your father has a brother in Oregon Territory," Sarah said quietly. "He's offered us work on his ranch. But this is our home. Home isn't a place, sweetheart. It's people who love each other." Emma understood the truth in those words, but it didn't make leaving any easier. This farm held all her memories of her mother, all her dreams of the future. Now Harold Garrett would own it all, its final victory in a war he'd never had any right to wage. The sound of approaching horses made them both look up. A dust cloud on the horizon resolved into a familiar figure, Sheriff Williams, riding hard toward their homestead. "Tom," he called as he reined in his horse. "Don't load another thing." Thomas emerged from the house, his face wary. Williams had done what he could to help them, but the law was the law. "What is it, Charlie?" Williams swung down from his saddle, his face lit with excitement. "Harold's dead, Tom. Thrown from his horse 3 days ago. Broke his neck." The words hit Emma like a physical blow. She'd hated Harold Garrett for what he'd done to their family, but she'd never wished him dead. The finality of it left her feeling strangely empty. "What does that mean for us?" Thomas asked quietly. "Everything," Williams grinned. The territorial court reviewed the case automatically when Harold died. Turns out his marriage contract wasn't worth the paper it was written on. Sarah never signed it as Sarah Garrett, only as Sarah Mitchell. Since she married you before the judgment was finalized, she's legally Sarah Patterson now. The contract's void. Sarah sank down onto the porch step, overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of fortune. We can stay. Farm's yours, free and clear. Harold's estate tried to continue the suit, but they don't have standing. You're in the clear. Emma felt tears of relief streaming down her face, but they were complicated by an unexpected sympathy for the man who'd tormented them. Harold Garrett had died alone, surrounded by the kind of wealth that couldn't buy the one thing he'd truly wanted: someone to love him freely. Thomas put his arm around Sarah, and Emma could see the weight of months of worry lifting from his shoulders. Thank you, Charlie. I don't know how to repay you, no need. Justice found its way, that's all. As Williams rode away, the Patterson family stood together in their yard, looking out at the land that was truly theirs now. The wheat was coming. Up green and strong, the garden Sarah had planted with such care was bursting with new life. And the house that had once echoed with loneliness now hummed with the quiet contentment of people who belonged to each other. I feel sorry for him, Sarah said quietly. Harold, I mean. He never understood that love can't be bought or forced, can only be given. Emma nodded, wise beyond her years. Maybe he understood at the end. Maybe that's why he looked so sad. When he left the church, Thomas pulled both his girls close. He made his choices, Sarah. We all do. The important thing is that you chose love, and love chose you back. That evening, as Emma helped Sarah prepare dinner in their kitchen, now and forever, she thought about the mysterious ways life unfolds. A year ago, she'd been a lonely child, dreaming of a sister. Today, she had not just a sister, but a complete family, bound together by trials that had only made their love stronger. Sarah, she said, setting the table with their few good dishes. Do you think Mama sent you to us? Sarah paused in her stirring, considering the question seriously. I don't know, sweetheart. I like to think that somewhere she's happy knowing. Her daughter has all the love she deserves. Emma smiled, watching through the window as her father tended to the animals with the quiet satisfaction of a man at peace with his life. The endless Nebraska sky stretched above them, painted with the soft colors of sunset. And she knew with absolute certainty that home wasn't just a place or just people. It was the love that bound them all together, stronger than any force that might try to tear them apart. They were a family now, complete and whole, and nothing would ever change that again.